I was 300 miles away on a business trip when my phone rang at 11:30 at night. The moment I heard my daughter Emily sobbing on the other end, my heart stopped. What she told me next shattered my world. My 15-year-old daughter was huddled on a park bench in the dark, alone and terrified. My own parents had thrown her out of their house, accusing her of stealing a family heirloom. I felt my knees buckle as guilt and panic collided inside me. I had left her with them for just 3 days. 3 days that had ended with my child homeless. I promised her I would be on the first flight home as I frantically called neighbors, friends, anyone who might help her, but no one answered. I paced my hotel room all night, waiting for the earliest flight back to Portland. My mind raced with worry about Emily being alone at Westfield Park, a place that seemed safe in daylight but took on a different character after dark. As a pharmaceutical sales representative, I occasionally had to travel for work, something that became much more complicated after losing my husband Brian to pancreatic cancer 3 years ago. At 36, I never expected to be a widow raising a teenage daughter alone. My relationship with my parents, Margaret and Thomas Riley, had always been strained. They were traditional, rigid people who criticized my parenting at every turn. They thought I was too lenient, too focused on being Emily's friend rather than her authority figure. When Brian was alive, he acted as a buffer between us, smoothing tensions with his easy charm and diplomacy. Without him, every interaction felt like walking through a minefield. Despite our differences, they were the only option for Emily when this mandatory sales conference came up. My boss had made it clear that my job depended on my attendance, and with college tuition looming in Emily's future, I couldn't risk losing my position. My parents had reluctantly agreed to watch her, making sure I understood what an imposition it was on their carefully structured retirement lifestyle. My mother had always been obsessed with her possessions, particularly her jewelry collection. The centerpiece was a gold locket containing a rare Victorian-era pearl that had allegedly belonged to a distant relative with connections to Boston high society. She had it appraised last year at just over $5,000, a fact she mentioned to anyone who would listen. According to Emily, the locket had gone missing the day before, and my mother immediately suspected her. Emily had admired the locket earlier in the week, asking questions about its history. In my mother's mind, this interest was tantamount to plotting its theft. What made no sense was why they would jump to this conclusion so quickly. Emily had never shown any dishonest tendencies. She was responsible, thoughtful, and honest to a fault. Once when she was 12, she walked 2 miles to return a $20 bill to a woman who had dropped it in a parking lot. The idea of her stealing anything, let alone something so significant, was absurd. The flight felt endless. When the plane finally landed, I called Emily immediately. She had managed to reach her friend Lily just after dawn, and Lily's mother had picked her up from the park. She was safe, at least physically, but her voice sounded hollow. "Mom," she said quietly, "there's something I need to tell you when you get here. I know who took the locket." My heart raced. "Tell me now, sweetheart." There was a long pause. "I can't. Not over the phone. I have evidence, but it's going to change everything. It might tear the family apart." Her words chilled me. What could possibly be so devastating? "Whatever it is, we'll face it together," I promised, though my stomach knotted with dread. The Uber ride to Lily's house gave me time to reflect on the fragile relationship between Emily and my parents. They had always been more critical of her than they had been of me, holding her to impossible standards. Brian used to say it was because she reminded them of me at that age, strong-willed and independent. The thought that they would actually throw her out in the evening, knowing she had nowhere to go, made my blood boil. What kind of grandparents would put their teenage granddaughter in danger like that? I had always tried to maintain a relationship with them for Emily's sake, believing that having grandparents in her life was important. Now I wondered if I had made a terrible mistake. If their love was so conditional, so easily withdrawn, perhaps it was doing more harm than good. As the car pulled up to Lily's modest ranch-style house, I saw Emily sitting on the porch steps. Her shoulders were slumped, her usually vibrant face pale and drawn. When she looked up and saw me, something flickered in her eyes. Not just relief, but determination. What she was about to show me would change our family forever. Lily's mother, Jenny, greeted me with a hug that conveyed both sympathy and concern. She showed up at our door around 6 this morning, she whispered, as Emily gathered her backpack. Wouldn't tell me much, just that there had been a fight with her grandparents. I was going to call you, but she begged me not to worry you until you landed. I thanked her profusely for taking Emily in, promising to explain everything once I understood it myself. The drive to our home was mostly silent. Emily stared out the window, occasionally wiping away tears that slipped down her cheeks. Once inside our living room, she finally broke down. It was horrible, Mom, she sobbed as I held her. Grandma couldn't find her locket yesterday afternoon, and she immediately started looking at me weird. By dinner, Grandpa was asking all these questions about where I'd been that day, if I'd been in their bedroom. Then Grandma just came right out and accused me. Tell me exactly what happened, I said, struggling to keep my own emotions in check. Emily took a deep breath. Grandma said the locket was in her jewelry box that morning, and by afternoon it was gone. She said I was the only one who had been talking about it, who had shown unusual interest in it. I told her I didn't take it, but she wouldn't listen. Grandpa backed her up, saying they'd trusted me in their home and I'd betrayed that trust. My fists clenched as I imagined my daughter facing these accusations alone. Then what? They searched my room, Mom. All my things. They dumped out my backpack, went through my pockets. Grandpa said if I confessed and returned it, they would just tell you I needed more discipline. But if I kept lying, her voice broke. He said it proved I was becoming delinquent because of your parenting, that maybe they should have fought harder for custody after Dad died. The casual cruelty of that statement stole my breath. They had never mentioned wanting custody before. Had they really considered trying to take my daughter from me when I was grieving my husband? When they didn't find anything, they said I must have hidden it somewhere or already sold it. Grandma was crying, saying it was irreplaceable. Grandpa said he couldn't have a thief in his house, that I needed to learn actions have consequences. He told me to get out. He what? My voice rose sharply. He said to get out and not come back, until I was ready to admit what I'd done and face the punishment I deserved. Grandma didn't even argue with him. She just looked at me like she hated me. I pulled Emily closer, fury building inside me. Sweetheart, I am so sorry. I never should have left you with them. Emily pulled away slightly, wiping her eyes. I need to show you something. She reached for her phone, her fingers trembling slightly as she navigated to the photo gallery. I wasn't going to show anyone this, but after what they did. She handed me the phone. On the screen was a video, obviously taken secretly from partially behind a doorway. It showed my mother's bedroom, specifically her antique vanity where she kept her jewelry box. A man was carefully lifting the lid, his back to the camera as he methodically examined the contents. Is that? I started, disbelief coloring my voice. Uncle Jack, Emily confirmed, referring to my father's brother. I accidentally recorded it. I was making a video tour of the house for my school project on different architectural styles, and I didn't realize he was in there until I started filming. I stopped right away and he never saw me. But when I looked at the footage later that night, she bit her lip. I didn't know what to do, Mom. I thought maybe he was just admiring it or something, but something felt off about the way he was being so secretive. Uncle Jack had always been the family's black sheep. A charming man with a perpetual financial crisis, he drifted in and out of our lives depending on his situation. My father maintained a strained relationship with him, occasionally helping him out of scrapes while complaining about his irresponsibility. This was the night before the locket went missing? I asked, studying the timestamp on the video. Emily nodded. I was going to delete it, but then when Grandma started accusing me, she pulled out something else from her backpack, a small notebook with a worn leather cover. I found this in the guest room desk after Uncle Jack left. I shouldn't have read it, but after seeing the video, I was curious. The notebook was a makeshift ledger, documenting gambling debts and payment schedules. The most recent entry, dated just 3 days ago, showed a debt of $4,500 to someone identified only as V, with a deadline scrawled in red. Uncle Jack has a gambling problem, Emily said quietly. And I think this isn't the first time he's taken things from family members. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. Jack had stolen the locket to pay a gambling debt, and my parents had immediately blamed my innocent daughter instead of considering their own brother might be responsible. "There's more," Emily said, her voice barely audible. "When I was cleaning up the guest bathroom after Uncle Jack left, I found a pawn shop receipt crumpled in the trash. I didn't think anything of it then, but now, I felt nauseous. My parents had thrown my daughter out onto the streets rather than face the possibility that Jack might be stealing from them again. The again in my thoughts gave me pause. Emily, what did you mean when you said this might not be the first time he's taken things from the family?" Her expression confirmed my suspicions before she even spoke. "There are older entries in the ledger. And I overheard Grandma and Grandpa arguing the morning after Uncle Jack left. Grandma said, 'Not again, Thomas. We can't keep covering for him.' And Grandpa said something like, 'He's family, Margaret. What are we supposed to do?' I sat back, stunned by the implications. My parents had known. They had known Jack had a history of stealing from them, yet they had immediately accused my daughter without a shred of evidence. "Mom?" Emily's voice pulled me from my thoughts. "What do we do now?" I squeezed her hand, my resolve hardening. "First, we get some rest. Then tomorrow, we're going to have a very uncomfortable conversation with your grandparents." The haunted look in Emily's eyes told me the damage had already been done. My parents had betrayed her trust in the most fundamental way. But they had also revealed something important to me. They would sacrifice my daughter's well-being to protect their secrets and save face. That night, as Emily finally fell into an exhausted sleep in her own bed, I sat in the kitchen staring at the evidence she had collected. The sweet, conscientious girl had been thrown out into the night by her own grandparents, forced to sleep on a park bench, like she was nothing to them. All to protect a family secret that was increasingly looking like a pattern rather than an isolated incident. Tomorrow, they would face the consequences of their actions. And I would make damn sure they never hurt my daughter again. The next morning, I drove to my parents' Tudor-style home in the suburbs, Emily beside me, in tense silence. I had suggested she stay home, but she insisted on coming. "I want to see their faces when they realize what they did," she said with a determination that both concerned and impressed me. My father answered the door with a stern expression that faltered slightly when he saw me. "Cynthia, we've been trying to call you." "I bet you have," I replied coldly, walking past him into the immaculate living room where my mother sat perched on the edge of her favorite armchair. Her eyes narrowed when she spotted Emily. "You have a lot of explaining to do, young lady," my mother began, but I cut her off immediately. "No, Mom. You and Dad are the ones who need to explain." My voice was steady, despite the rage coursing through me. "You threw my 15-year-old daughter out of your house at night, forcing her to sleep on a park bench. Do you have any idea what could have happened to her?" My father cleared his throat. "Cynthia, you don't understand the situation. Emily stole your mother's locket, a family heirloom worth thousands of dollars. We had to take firm action." "Firm action?" I repeated incredulously. "You put her in danger based on an accusation with zero evidence. What kind of grandparents are you?" "We had evidence," my mother insisted, her voice rising. "She was asking all about the locket earlier that week. She was the only one who showed interest in it. And when we confronted her, she acted guilty." Emily flinched beside me, and I placed a protective arm around her shoulders. "She acted upset because she was being falsely accused," I said. "And you were so convinced of her guilt that you never considered any other possibility. Like, for instance, that Uncle Jack might have taken it." The flash of alarm that passed between my parents confirmed everything. My father recovered quickly, his face hardening. "That's a ridiculous accusation. Jack wasn't even here when the locket went missing." "Actually, he was," I said, pulling out Emily's phone. "Emily accidentally recorded this the night before the locket disappeared." I played the video. The silence in the room was absolute as we watched Jack methodically going through my mother's jewelry box. When it ended, my father's face had reddened with anger but not surprise. "That proves nothing," he blustered. "He was probably just admiring it. You can't see him taking anything." "Stop it, Dad." My voice sharpened. Emily also found his gambling ledger and a pawn shop receipt. But that's not even the point. The point is that you immediately blamed her without considering anyone else, especially someone with a history of stealing from you. My mother's face went pale. What are you talking about? I heard you arguing, Emily said quietly, speaking for the first time since we'd arrived. You said, "Not again, Thomas." You knew Uncle Jack had stolen from you before, but you still blamed me first. My mother looked away, unable to meet her granddaughter's eyes. My father stepped in, his tone conciliatory but condescending. Cynthia, family matters are complicated. Jack has had his struggles, yes, but he's getting help. We've been trying to support him through a difficult time. By sacrificing my daughter? I asked incredulously. By accusing her of theft and putting her in physical danger? Don't be dramatic, my mother said dismissively. She could have called a friend earlier if she really felt unsafe. The callousness of the statement left me momentarily speechless. Emily's hand tightened around mine. I tried calling Lily first, Emily said. Her phone was off. I tried 3 other friends before I called Mom. I was scared, and it was getting cold and dark. My father waved his hand impatiently. The point is, we had reason to believe Emily had taken the locket, if she had just admitted it. Admitted to something she didn't do? I interrupted. Is that how you show love in this family? Demand false confessions? We were trying to teach her accountability, my mother insisted. No, I said firmly. You were trying to protect Uncle Jack, just like you've obviously done before, and you were willing to sacrifice my daughter to do it. My father's expression darkened. That's enough, Cynthia. You've always been too soft on Emily, just like you were too soft on yourself. Some discipline would do her good. Discipline? I echoed. Is that what you call kicking a minor out of your house with nowhere to go? That's not discipline, Dad. That's abuse. The word hung in the air between us. My mother flinched, but my father's jaw only tightened. You're overreacting, he said. Emily was never in any real danger. You don't know that, I shot back. Anything could have happened to her. My father's patience visibly snapped. This is exactly why we've been concerned about your parenting, Cynthia. You're too emotional, too permissive. Emily needs structure, consequences. What are you talking about? Concerned about my parenting? I asked, a new suspicion forming. My father and mother exchanged glances. It was my mother who spoke. We've been worried since Brian died that you're not providing the stable home Emily needs. Your job takes you away too often. She's left alone too much. I travel maybe once a month for work, I said defensively. Emily is perfectly capable of taking care of herself for a few hours after school, and I always arrange for adult supervision when I'm gone overnight. Like us, my father interjected, and look how that turned out. Something in his tone made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. What exactly are you saying? My father squared his shoulders. We've been documenting instances of your parental shortcomings. The late nights, the work trips, the times Emily has mentioned being left alone. We believe Emily might be better off in a more stable environment. The implication hit me like a physical blow. You've been building a case to take custody of my daughter? My mother at least had the decency to look uncomfortable. We're concerned, Cynthia. After this incident with the locket, we're even more convinced Emily needs firmer guidance. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. So accusing Emily of theft wasn't just about covering for Jack. It was about documenting her criminal behavior for a custody case? My father's silence was answer enough. I turned to Emily, whose face reflected the same shock and betrayal I felt. Wait here, I told her quietly. I need to look for something. Ignoring my parents' protests, I headed straight for my father's home office. Years of being their daughter had taught me where they kept important documents. It took only moments to find the folder labeled Emily Grace Custody. Inside were printouts of my work schedule, notes on times I'd been late picking Emily up from activities, even statements from their friends about my concerning behavior since becoming a widow. The most damning document was a draft letter to a family court judge, dated just 2 weeks earlier, expressing concern about Emily's increasing behavioral issues and my inability to provide adequate supervision and discipline. They had been planning this for months. I returned to the living room, the folder clutched in my hand. Emily's eyes widened when she saw it. "How long?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. "How long have you been planning to take my daughter from me?" My mother looked away, but my father met my gaze defiantly. "Since about 6 months after Brian died, when it became clear you weren't going to accept our help or advice. When you insisted on doing everything your way, even though you were clearly struggling." "I was grieving," I said incredulously. "We both were. And instead of supporting us, you were documenting my perceived failings as a mother?" "We wanted what's best for Emily," my mother insisted. "No," I contradicted her. "You wanted control. You always have." A terrible thought occurred to me. The missing locket was going to be the final piece, wasn't it? Proof that Emily was developing criminal tendencies under my care? That's why you were so quick to accuse her, why you threw her out. It wasn't just about protecting Jack, it was about building your case. The flash of confirmation in my father's eyes made me physically ill. "We're leaving," I said to Emily, who stood frozen in disbelief. "And don't try to contact us until you're ready to apologize not just for accusing Emily of theft, but for this entire disgusting scheme." As we walked to the door, my father called after us. "You're making a mistake, Cynthia. Emily needs structure and discipline. You can't provide that while working full-time and playing the role of her friend instead of her parent." I turned back one last time. "What Emily needs is love and trust, Dad. 2 things you clearly know nothing about." In the car, Emily finally broke down. "They never really loved me, did they?" she asked through tears. "They were just waiting for me to mess up so they could take me away from you." I pulled her into a fierce hug. "They love the idea of you, sweetheart. The perfect, obedient granddaughter they could mold in their image. But they don't know the real you, the kind, honest, amazing person you are. And that's their loss." As we drove home, I realized this confrontation had revealed something far more insidious than I'd initially suspected. The accusation about the locket wasn't just a terrible mistake or an effort to protect Jack. It was part of a calculated plan to document Emily's criminal behavior to strengthen a custody case they'd been building for years. The depth of that betrayal left me reeling, but it also strengthened my resolve. My parents would never hurt Emily again. I would make sure of it. Over the next few days, I took emergency time off work to help Emily process what had happened. She was uncharacteristically quiet, spending most of her time in her room. When I suggested seeing her regular therapist, Dr. Winters, she nodded without argument, which worried me even more than her silence. "She's experiencing a profound betrayal," Dr. Winters told me after their session, while Emily waited in the reception area. Her grandparents represented stability and authority in her life. Finding out they were not only willing to falsely accuse her, but had been actively plotting to separate her from you, it's shaken her foundation. I nodded, fighting back tears. "How do I help her?" "Be consistent, transparent. Rebuild her sense of security by being exactly who you've always been, her rock." Dr. Winters hesitated. "She's also worried about you. She feels responsible for the rift with your parents." "That's ridiculous," I protested. "None of this is her fault." "Of course not. But she needs to hear that from you, repeatedly." She gave me a sympathetic smile. "And Cynthia? Take care of yourself too. You've also experienced a significant betrayal." After dropping Emily at school the next day, her first day back, since the incident, I decided to dig deeper into my parents' finances. Their sudden interest in gaining custody of Emily struck me as suspicious, especially given how reluctant they'd always been to spend time with her. I called my friend Tara, who worked at the bank where my parents had their accounts. It wasn't entirely ethical, but I needed answers. "I can't give you details," Tara said when we met for coffee. "But I can tell you your parents made a significant withdrawal about 7 months ago. And when I say significant, I mean almost their entire retirement savings." "What? That doesn't make sense." "They're always talking about their careful financial planning," Tara shrugged. "All I know is they liquidated nearly everything, and they didn't seem happy about it." This new information nagged at me. My parents had always been financially conservative, priding themselves on their substantial retirement fund. What could have possibly convinced them to withdraw it all? On a hunch, I called a realtor friend who had access to property records. Your parents refinanced their house last year, she confirmed after some research. They took out a pretty hefty second mortgage. Almost maxed out their equity. The pieces were starting to form a disturbing picture. My parents were in financial trouble. Serious trouble. And the timing aligned perfectly with when they started building their custody case against me. Emily's father, my late husband Brian, had left a substantial insurance policy, plus monthly survivor benefits, that would continue until Emily turned 18. The funds were in a trust I managed for her future education and needs. Could my parents' sudden interest in custody be financially motivated? The thought was almost too terrible to consider. That evening, as Emily worked on homework, I received an unexpected call from an unfamiliar number. "Cynthia Riley?" a woman's voice asked. "Yes, who's this?" "Audrey Blackwood. We went to high school together?" "I'm a detective with the Portland Police Department now." I vaguely remembered Audrey, a quiet, serious girl who had always talked about going into law enforcement. "What can I do for you, Audrey?" "This is somewhat awkward," she began. "But I'm investigating a series of pawn shop transactions that might be related to your family. A gold locket with a Victorian pearl was pawned 3 days ago by a man identified as Jack Riley. When we questioned the pawn shop owner, he mentioned this wasn't the first time Mr. Riley had brought in family heirlooms. My heart raced. My Uncle Jack has a history of pawning family items? According to our records, yes. Over the past 2 years, he's pawned several items that match descriptions of family heirlooms from police reports. The interesting thing is, those reports were always withdrawn before we could fully investigate. Withdrawn by whom? Your parents, Thomas and Margaret Riley. The confirmation sent a chill through me. So they knew. They've known all along that Jack was stealing from them. It appears so, Audrey confirmed. And here's where it gets relevant to you. The pawnshop owner mentioned that your uncle seemed particularly nervous this time, saying something about needing to make it right before they blame the kid. Would you know anything about that? I told Audrey everything, how my parents had accused Emily of stealing the locket, kicked her out, and how we'd discovered they were building a custody case against me. "Jesus, Cynthia?" she breathed when I finished. I don't even have words. I'm still trying to understand why, I admitted. But I'm starting to think it might be about money. They seem to be in financial trouble, and Emily has survivor benefits from her father. Audrey was silent for a moment. I shouldn't tell you this, but as your friend, your Uncle Jack has a record. Mostly minor stuff, but there's a pattern of gambling-related charges. And your father has bailed him out numerous times. How many times? At least 7 in the past 3 years. The last one was about 8 months ago, a pretty significant amount for bail and legal fees. The timeline matched perfectly with when my parents had withdrawn their retirement savings. Had they lost everything bailing out Jack? And were they now trying to gain access to Emily's survivor benefits to recover financially? Audrey, is there any way to find out if the locket is still at the pawn shop? I can check, she offered. If it's there, we might be able to recover it as evidence. After hanging up, I sat in stunned silence, trying to process this new information. My parents had known about Jack stealing for years. They had covered for him, withdrawn police reports, bailed him out repeatedly. And when they ran out of money, they had turned their sights on Emily's benefits, creating a custody case built on lies and manipulation. The next morning, I received a text from Emily's school counselor asking me to call. My stomach dropped, fearing Emily was having trouble adjusting after everything that had happened. "Miss Riley, I'm concerned about Emily," the counselor, Miss Turner, began. "She had a confrontation with another student today. Apparently, this student was spreading rumors that Emily had stolen from her grandparents." "What?" I gasped. "How would anyone at school know about that?" According to Emily, the student's parents are friends with your parents. Emily became quite upset, understandably. She's in my office now. I rushed to the school, finding Emily with red-rimmed eyes and slumped shoulders. "Madison told everyone I'm a thief," she whispered when we were alone. "She said Grandma and Grandpa are heartbroken over what I did, that I betrayed my own family. Mom, how could they do this? How could they tell other people these lies about me? The cruelty of it took my breath away. Not content with accusing Emily themselves, my parents were now damaging her reputation in the community. Your grades have dropped significantly this week, Miss Turner noted when she rejoined us. From straight, as to nearly failing several classes. This isn't like you, Emily. I can't focus, Emily admitted. Every time I try to study, I keep thinking about sleeping on that bench, about how scared I was. And now everyone thinks I'm a thief. On the drive home, Emily finally voiced the fear that had clearly been consuming her. What if they win, Mom? What if a judge believes them and makes me live with them? That will never happen, I promised, though uncertainty gnawed at me. My parents were respected members of the community. They had resources and connections, and they had already shown they were willing to lie and manipulate to get what they wanted. That night, after Emily had gone to bed, I received another call from Audrey. The locket is still at the pawn shop, she confirmed. The owner was holding it for the standard waiting period. We can recover it, but we'll need you to identify it officially. I'll do whatever it takes, I assured her. There's more, Audrey continued, her voice serious. I did some digging into your parents' finances, strictly off the record. They made a large payment to a family law attorney, specialized in grandparents' rights cases. The same attorney filed preliminary paperwork exploring a custody case just last month. The confirmation of my worst fears sent a wave of nausea through me. So they really are trying to take Emily. It looks that way, Audrey agreed. And Cynthia? Based on what you've told me about Emily being forced out of their home, plus the false accusations, you might have grounds for a restraining order. It would make any custody attempt much more difficult for them. After hanging up, I checked on Emily, finding her in a restless sleep. On her desk lay her school journal, open to a page filled with her neat handwriting. I knew I shouldn't read it, but my concern overrode my respect for her privacy. I don't understand how people who are supposed to love you can hurt you so much, she had written. Mom tries to act strong, but I know she's devastated. Her own parents betrayed her too. Sometimes I think maybe Dad was the glue holding our family together. Since he died, everything's fallen apart. The worst part is how scared Mom looks sometimes, like she's afraid they'll really take me away. I wish Dad was here. He'd know how to fix this. Tears streamed down my face as I carefully closed the journal. Emily was right. Brian would have known what to do. He had always been the family peacemaker, the one who could navigate difficult situations with grace and humor. But Brian was gone, and I had to be both mother and father now. I had to be strong enough to protect our daughter from the very people who should have been helping us heal. Tomorrow, I would take Audrey's advice and file for a restraining order. I would recover the locket and document everything that had happened. And I would make sure my parents understood they couldn't hurt Emily ever again. As I turned to leave, my gaze fell on a framed photo of Brian holding a 10-year-old Emily on his shoulders, both of them laughing in the summer sunshine. I'll fix this, I whispered to his smiling image. I promise. The next few weeks passed in a blur of legal consultations, therapy appointments, and sleepless nights. Emily continued to struggle at school, her usual enthusiasm for learning replaced by anxiety and withdrawal. I installed a home security system after noticing my parents' car driving slowly past our house several times a day. They can't just show up and take me, right? Emily asked one evening, glancing nervously at the window when a car door slammed somewhere on our street. Absolutely not, I assured her. Though my own anxiety simmered just below the surface, the temporary restraining order prevents them from coming within 100 yards of us or contacting us directly. I didn't tell her about the threatening message my father had left on my work voicemail before the order was granted. You're making a terrible mistake, Cynthia. Stop this investigation now, or you'll regret it. We're only thinking of Emily's best interests. The implied threat had sent a chill through me. I'd never heard that tone in my father's voice before, cold and calculating. Later that week, I returned home from grocery shopping to find Emily in tears. They were here, Mom, she sobbed. Grandma and Grandpa. They used their key to get in. What? I gasped, immediately pulling out my phone to call Audrey. That violates the restraining order. Are you okay? Did they hurt you? I was in my room with headphones on, she explained, still shaking. When I came out to get a snack, I heard them in your office. They didn't see me, so I hid in the bathroom and called Tracy to pick me up. Tracy was our neighbor, a retired teacher who had become a surrogate grandmother to Emily. After ensuring Emily was safe with Tracy, I carefully examined my home office. At first glance, nothing seemed out of place, but when I checked my filing cabinet, I discovered several documents, missing papers, related to Emily's trust fund and Brian's life insurance policy. They had also taken Emily's school journal and her backup phone. They're building their case, Audrey confirmed when she arrived to take my statement. Gathering any evidence they can use to portray you as an unfit mother or Emily as troubled. But how? I asked, still stunned by their boldness. They had to know this would violate the restraining order. People who feel entitled to control others often believe rules don't apply to them, Audrey explained, her expression grim. They probably convinced themselves they were justified in breaking in because they're protecting Emily. Later that evening, after installing additional security cameras throughout the house, I received a text from Emily's friend Madison's mother. Just heard what your parents are saying about Emily. Disgusting lies. Madison told me everything. We're here for you both. I called her immediately. What exactly are they saying, Jen? Her hesitation spoke volumes. They told several parents at the school fundraiser that Emily has been stealing and lying since Brian died. That you're in denial about her problems because of your grief. They even suggested she might be using drugs. The calculated cruelty took my breath away. They were systematically destroying Emily's reputation, isolating us from our support network. Madison feels terrible, Jen continued. She realized she was being used to spread gossip and stood up to them at the event. Several parents walked away when your mother started talking about Emily's so-called issues. I thanked her for the information, my resolve hardening. This had gone beyond a family dispute. It was character assassination. The next day at school, Emily was confronted again, this time by a teacher who had heard the rumors. Mrs. Patrick asked if I needed to talk about my issues. Emily reported miserably. She looked at me like I was a bomb about to go off. When I told her the rumors weren't true, she said she was here if I wanted to come clean. Mom, I can't go back there. Everyone's whispering about me. I arranged for Emily to temporarily switch to online classes while we sorted out the situation. She retreated further into herself, jumping at unexpected noises and checking the security camera feeds obsessively. That Friday, I received a call from an unknown number. Cynthia, it's Jack, your uncle. Please don't hang up. My finger hovered over the end call button, but curiosity won out. What do you want, Jack? To apologize. And to warn you. His voice sounded rough, either from emotion or alcohol. I never meant for Emily to take the blame. You have to believe me. Why should I believe anything you say? I asked coldly. Because I'm the one who took the locket, he admitted. I had gambling debts, bad ones. But I was going to pawn it just for a few weeks, then buy it back before anyone noticed. So why didn't you come forward when my parents accused Emily? When they threw her out? He was quiet for a moment. They knew it was me. They saw me leaving with it on their security camera. But they made me stay quiet. My blood ran cold. What are you talking about? Thomas and Margaret, they've been covering for me for years. Bailing me out, paying my debts. But this time was different. When they confronted me about the locket, I expected the usual lecture and disappointment. Instead, your father said this might be useful. That they needed documentation of Emily's behavioral issues for their case. They deliberately let Emily take the blame, I whispered, the full horror of it sinking in. Even though they knew she was innocent. Yes, Jack confirmed, his voice breaking. I wanted to come forward, Cynthia. I swear I did. But they have leverage over me. There are things in my past they've helped cover up. Things that could send me to prison. So you let them destroy my daughter's reputation instead? Let them kick her out to sleep on a park bench? I'm not proud of myself, he said quietly. That's why I'm calling now. They're escalating, Cynthia. This isn't just about custody anymore. Thomas is obsessed. He's talking about proving you're mentally unstable, claiming you're making up the whole theft story. Why are you telling me this now? Because what they did to Emily was wrong. And because I'm afraid of what they might do next. They're desperate. The custody case isn't going well with the restraining order in place. And they need Emily's survivor benefits to recover financially after bailing me out last year. After hanging up, I sat in stunned silence. My parents had known all along that Jack had taken the locket. They had deliberately allowed, even encouraged, Emily to be blamed. The calculated cruelty of it made me physically ill. A knock at the front door startled me. Through the security camera, I saw Uncle Jack shifting nervously on the porch. Against my better judgment, I let him in. Up close, he looked terrible, haggard, and thin, with the shaky hands of someone either coming off a bender or desperately needing a drink. "I brought this," he said, holding out a small velvet pouch. "I bought it back from the pawn shop. Inside was my mother's locket, the gold tarnished but intact." "Why?" I asked simply. Jack's eyes filled with tears. "Because I never meant for Emily to get hurt. She's a good kid. She reminds me of you at that age, bright, kind. I was going to come forward when I heard they'd accused her. But your father..." He shuddered. "He reminded me of what would happen if I didn't play along. The charges he could revive." "What charges, Jack?" He looked away. "Fraud. Theft. I've done things I'm not proud of, Cynthia. Your parents have helped make evidence disappear, paid off people I've hurt financially. If they stopped protecting me," he let the implication hang. "So you let them sacrifice my daughter to protect yourself." Jack flinched. "I'm trying to make it right now. That's why I'm here, even though Thomas will probably cut me off for good when he finds out." He pulled out a small thumb drive. "This has recordings of conversations with your parents from the past few months. About the custody case, about setting Emily up, about their financial situation. It's all there." I stared at the tiny device, hardly daring to believe it. "Why would you record them?" "Self-preservation," he admitted with a wry smile. "Your father has screwed me over before, using me as a scapegoat when it suited him. I started recording our conversations as insurance." After Jack left, I plugged in the thumb drive with trembling hands. The first recording was dated just 2 days after I'd left Emily with my parents for my business trip. "The opportunity is perfect," my father's voice said clearly. "Cynthia's gone, and we have Emily here without her influence. We just need something concrete to add to the file." "But accusing her of stealing?" My mother sounded uncertain. "That seems extreme, Thomas. We need documentation of behavioral issues, Margaret. The lawyer says it's our best shot at getting custody. And with it, control of her trust and benefits." "I still don't see why we need to go this far," my mother protested. "There must be another way to recover financially." "There isn't," my father snapped. "We've mortgaged the house to the limit. Your retirement account is empty after bailing out Jack. Emily's survivor benefits are our only option, unless you want to sell this house and move into an apartment." The naked greed in his voice made me sick. The recordings continued, each more damning than the last. They discussed planting evidence in Emily's room, spreading rumors at school, even which judge might be most sympathetic to their case. The final recording, dated just 3 days ago, chilled me to the bone. "The restraining order complicates things," my father said. "But I've been talking to Dr. Simmons. If we can present enough evidence that Cynthia is unstable, paranoid, making false accusations, turning Emily against us, he thinks we can get an emergency custody order." "And the security footage of Jack taking the locket?" my mother asked. "Corrupted files?" my father replied smoothly. "Very unfortunate technical glitch." I sat back, my mind racing. They were planning to have me declared mentally unfit to strengthen their custody case, to erase the evidence of Jack's theft and paint me as paranoid. Just then, Emily appeared in the doorway, her face pale. "I heard," she whispered. "I heard the recordings. They were never going to stop, were they? They were going to keep lying until they took me away from you." I pulled her into a tight hug, my heart breaking for all she had endured. "They will never take you away from me," I promised. Never. That night, as Emily finally slept peacefully for the first time in weeks, I made a decision. Tomorrow, I would take Jack's recordings, the locket, and everything else we had gathered to my lawyer. It was time to end this nightmare once and for all. The next morning, I called in sick to work and contacted my lawyer, Sandra Williams, arranging an emergency meeting. With Emily safely at Tracy's house, I gathered all our evidence: Jack's recordings, the recovered locket, Emily's video, the custody documents I'd found in my father's office, and photographs of Emily's journal entries about the incident. "This is substantial," Sandra said as she reviewed everything. Her normally composed expression gave way to shock as she listened to the recordings. "Cynthia, this goes well beyond a family dispute. They deliberately orchestrated false accusations against a minor, violated a restraining order, and are now conspiring to have you declared mentally unfit. We need to take immediate action." "What do you recommend?" I asked. My hands twisted in my lap. "First, we need to amend the temporary restraining order to make it permanent. With this evidence, that shouldn't be difficult. Second, we should file for a cease and desist regarding the spreading of false information about Emily. Third, I want to explore pressing charges for breaking and entering, violation of the restraining order, and potentially filing false reports." She paused, studying me carefully. "You should also know that what they're doing could potentially be considered attempted parental alienation and custodial interference. Those are serious matters in family court." By the end of our meeting, Sandra had outlined a comprehensive legal strategy. She would petition for an emergency hearing to present our evidence to a judge, hopefully putting an end to my parents' custody attempts once and for all. As I left her office, my phone rang. It was Audrey. "I've got some news," she said without preamble. "We found security footage from the pawn shop showing Jack selling the locket. The timestamp matches exactly when Emily was in school, giving her a solid alibi. Even better, the pawn shop owner remembers Jack mentioning it was a family emergency and that his brother knew he was taking it." Relief washed over me. "That's fantastic, Audrey. Is there any way to get a copy of that footage?" "Already done. I'm emailing it to you now." "And Cynthia? We also found records of previous transactions. Jack has pawned items matching descriptions of your mother's jewelry at least 6 times in the past 3 years. And my parents withdrew the police reports each time." I finished. "Exactly. It establishes a pattern that supports your account completely." Next, I visited Emily's therapist, Dr. Winters, to discuss how the ongoing situation was affecting her. "Emily is showing signs of anxiety and depression," Dr. Winters confirmed. "The betrayal by her grandparents, combined with the public humiliation at school, has significantly impacted her sense of security and self-worth. I'm particularly concerned about her withdrawal from friends and activities she previously enjoyed. Would you be willing to document this for court?" I asked. "To show the harm their actions have caused?" "Absolutely," Dr. Winters agreed. "What they've done constitutes emotional abuse, and I have an obligation to advocate for Emily's well-being." Armed with professional support, I felt more confident about our chances of stopping my parents permanently, but I still needed to understand exactly what had pushed them to such extremes. On a hunch, I contacted a former colleague who now worked in insurance fraud investigation. "Can you tell me if anyone has tried to access Brian's life insurance policy or make changes to the beneficiary?" I asked after explaining the situation. He called back an hour later, his voice grave. "There have been 3 attempts to inquire about changing the beneficiary designation, all from someone claiming to be you. The requests were flagged as suspicious because they came from an email address not on file. The most recent attempt was just last week. My parents had actually tried to impersonate me to gain access to Brian's insurance money. The depths of their deception seemed endless." On my way to pick up Emily from Tracy's, I stopped by our local copy center to organize all our evidence. While waiting, I noticed an envelope on the counter addressed to me in familiar handwriting: Brian's. The employee explained that a man had dropped it off months ago, with instructions to mail it on a specific date, but it had been misplaced. When they found it during cleaning, they'd held it for pickup instead. With trembling hands, I opened the envelope, finding a USB drive and a letter dated just weeks before Brian's death. "My dearest Cynthia," it began. "If you're reading this, I've been gone for some time. There are things I never told you about your parents, things I protected you from to keep peace in the family. But if you've received this, the contingency plan I set up has been triggered, meaning they've likely shown their true colors in my absence. I plugged the USB drive into my laptop with a growing sense of disbelief. On it were years of journal entries Brian had kept, documenting concerning patterns of behavior from my parents, emotional manipulation, subtle undermining of my confidence, attempts to control our parenting decisions, and even financial interference. I noticed the pattern early in our marriage, Brian wrote. How they would criticize you just enough to make you doubt yourself, then offer help that gave them more control. How they isolated you from friends who didn't meet their approval. How they tried to dictate every aspect of Emily's upbringing. I've been running interference for years, Cynthia, trying to protect you both while maintaining family harmony. Tears streamed down my face as I read his detailed accounts of incidents I had minimized or forgotten, my father undermining my career choices, my mother subtly criticizing my appearance and parenting, both of them attempting to make major decisions about Emily's education and activities without consulting us. I've arranged for this package to be delivered if anyone makes repeated inquiries into Emily's trust fund or my life insurance policy, the letter continued. Because if they're trying to access those funds after I'm gone, it means they're showing the controlling, manipulative behavior I've worked to shield you from. Trust your instincts, Cynthia. You're a wonderful mother, and stronger than you know. Don't let them make you doubt that. The letter was like hearing Brian's voice again, validating everything I'd felt but couldn't quite articulate about my relationship with my parents. It wasn't just about the money or the locket, it was about control. They had been trying to control me my entire life, and when that failed, they had turned their attention to controlling Emily. Brian had seen it all along, had protected us in ways I never realized. And he had prepared for the possibility that they would show their true colors after he was gone. Armed with this final piece of evidence, Brian's meticulous documentation of their manipulative patterns, I felt a new sense of resolve. This wasn't just about defending ourselves from false accusations, it was about breaking free from a lifetime of manipulation. That evening, I showed everything to Emily. She deserved to know the full truth, painful as it was. Dad knew, she whispered, touching the screen where his handwriting appeared. He knew what they were really like, and he protected us. Yes, he did, I agreed softly. And now he's still protecting us, even though he's gone. Emily looked up, her eyes clear for the first time in weeks. I want to go to the hearing. I want to face them and tell the judge what they did. Are you sure? I asked, concerned about putting her through more trauma. She nodded firmly. I'm sure. Dad stood up to them for years. Now it's our turn. The next day, we received notice that the emergency hearing was scheduled for the following Monday. Sandra had submitted all our evidence, including Brian's journal entries, to the judge. The judge was particularly troubled by the recordings, she reported. She's issued a summons requiring your parents to appear and explain their actions. The weekend passed in a blur of preparation. Emily worked with Dr. Winters on strategies to manage her anxiety about facing her grandparents in court. I rehearsed my statement with Sandra, ensuring I could present our case clearly and factually, without letting emotion overwhelm me. Sunday evening, we received an unexpected visit from Uncle Jack. He looked better than he had before, sober, with clear eyes and steady hands. I wanted you to know that I'll be testifying tomorrow, he said. Thomas called and threatened me, told me he'd make sure I went to prison if I showed up. But I'm done being his puppet. Why the change of heart? I asked, still wary of his motives. Jack's expression softened as he looked at Emily. Because what they did to her was unforgivable. And because I'm tired of being the family scapegoat while Thomas pretends to be better than me. The truth is, we're both damaged by the way our parents raised us. The difference is, I own my mistakes. As he turned to leave, he handed me another thumb drive. More recordings. Thomas called me last night, trying to convince me to lie in court. Said he'd pay off my current gambling debts if I testified that you coached Emily to accuse me of stealing the locket. He shook his head. I recorded the whole thing. That final piece of evidence, the recording of my father attempting to bribe Jack into perjury, cemented our case. As I prepared for bed that night, I felt a strange sense of calm. Tomorrow would be difficult, even painful, but it would also bring an end to the nightmare. Emily appeared in my doorway, a small smile on her face for the first time in weeks. I found something, she said, holding out a photograph I hadn't seen in years. It showed Brian and me on our wedding day, looking young and happy. In the background, barely visible, were my parents, my father's expression cold and disapproving, my mother's smile not reaching her eyes. Dad wrote on the back, Emily said, turning it over. In Brian's neat handwriting was a simple message. The day I promised to create the family you deserve. The day we started breaking the cycle. I hugged Emily tightly, tears flowing freely. And that's exactly what we're going to do tomorrow. Break the cycle, once and for all. The family court was smaller than I'd imagined, with warm wooden paneling that did little to ease the tension in the room. Emily sat beside me, her back straight, hands folded tightly in her lap. Across the aisle, my parents conferred with their attorney, occasionally casting glances in our direction. My father's expression was defiant, my mother's unreadable. Judge Caroline Reeves, a stern-looking woman in her 60s, reviewed our file with methodical precision. When she finally looked up, her gaze swept over all of us before settling on my parents. Before we begin the formal proceedings, I want to make something clear, she said, her voice carrying surprising warmth despite her formal demeanor. This court's primary concern is the well-being of the minor child, Emily Grace Riley. I've reviewed the substantial evidence submitted, and I must say I find the allegations extremely troubling. My father shifted uncomfortably as she continued. Mr. and Mrs. Riley, you've petitioned for custody of your granddaughter, alleging parental unfitness. However, the evidence before me suggests a troubling pattern of behavior on your part, including false accusations against a minor, violation of a restraining order, and potential financial motivations for seeking custody. My parents' lawyer leaned forward. Your Honor, my clients categorically deny these accusations. They've been loving grandparents concerned about their granddaughter's welfare under her mother's care. Judge Reeves raised an eyebrow. I have recordings that suggest otherwise, Counselor. Unless you're prepared to claim they've been falsified? The lawyer glanced nervously at my father, who gave an almost imperceptible shake of his head. Let's proceed with testimony, the judge said. Miss Cynthia Riley, please approach. As I took the stand, I caught Emily's encouraging smile. Drawing strength from her courage, I detailed everything that had happened from the moment Emily called me from the park bench to the discovery of Brian's hidden documentation of my parents' manipulative behavior. They didn't just falsely accuse Emily of theft, I concluded. They deliberately engineered a situation where she would be blamed for something they knew their own son had done. They spread rumors at her school, damaging her reputation and mental health. And they did all of this to gain control of her survivor benefits after losing their retirement savings, bailing out my uncle. When I finished, my parents' lawyer attempted to paint me as emotionally unstable, suggesting I was paranoid and turning Emily against her loving grandparents. I remained calm, letting the evidence speak for itself. Emily testified next, her voice growing stronger as she described the night she spent on the park bench. Afraid and alone. The worst part wasn't the cold, or the scary noises, or even being called a thief, she said, looking directly at her grandparents for the first time. It was realizing the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally were willing to throw me away to protect their secrets and get what they wanted. Uncle Jack's testimony proved pivotal. He admitted to stealing the locket to pay gambling debts, confirming that my parents had seen him on their security cameras but chosen to blame Emily instead to strengthen their custody case. Thomas and Margaret have been covering up my thefts for years, he testified. But this was different. They saw an opportunity to use the situation to their advantage, regardless of who got hurt in the process. The most damning evidence came from the recordings where my parents explicitly discussed using the false theft accusation to document Emily's behavioral issues and their attempts to have me declared mentally unfit. As the recordings played, my father's face grew increasingly pale. My mother stared at the floor, unwilling to meet anyone's gaze. When all testimony concluded, Judge Reeves called for a brief recess. The tension in the room was palpable as we waited for her return. Emily squeezed my hand tightly. No matter what happens, she whispered, we know the truth. We have each other. When Judge Reeves returned, her expression was solemn. In my 23 years on the bench, she began, I have seen many difficult family situations, But rarely have I encountered such calculated manipulation and disregard for a child's well-being as displayed in this case. She turned to my parents. Mr. and Mrs. Riley, your petition for custody is denied. Furthermore, I am making the restraining order permanent, barring you from any contact with your daughter or granddaughter for a period of not less than 2 years, after which the order may be reviewed if appropriate therapy and amends have been made. My father started to protest, but she silenced him with a raised hand. Additionally, I am referring this case to the district attorney's office for potential criminal charges related to filing false police reports, violation of a restraining order, breaking and entering, and attempted custodial interference. I am also ordering a full investigation into your financial dealings with regard to Emily's trust fund and survivor benefits. She softened her tone slightly as she addressed me. Miss Riley, this court finds no evidence whatsoever of parental unfitness. On the contrary, your actions throughout this ordeal demonstrate a mother fiercely protective of her child's well-being, even when that meant standing against your own parents. The court commends your courage. Finally, she spoke directly to Emily. Young lady, what happened to you was wrong on every level. No child should ever be subjected to such treatment, especially by those entrusted with their care. I hope you know that none of this was your fault, and that your mother has done everything possible to protect you. As we prepared to leave the courtroom, my father suddenly approached, ignoring his lawyer's attempt to stop him. Cynthia, you can't do this, he said, his voice uncharacteristically desperate. We're your parents. I looked at him calmly, finally seeing him clearly. Being a parent isn't just about biology, Dad. It's about putting your child's well-being above your own desires and ego. It's about unconditional love and support, something you never gave me, and certainly never gave Emily. We did everything for you, my mother interjected, her voice trembling. Everything. No, I corrected her gently. You did everything to control me. There's a difference. I turned to leave, but Emily hesitated, facing her grandparents one last time. I would have forgiven you, she said softly. If you had just admitted what you did and apologized, I would have forgiven you. That's what real family does. My father turned pale. My mother went completely silent, the truth of Emily's words seemingly penetrating her defenses for the first time. As we walked out of the courthouse into the bright spring sunshine, Emily took a deep breath. It's over, right? Yes, I assured her, putting my arm around her shoulders. It's over. The next few months were dedicated to healing. Emily worked with Dr. Winters to process her feelings of betrayal and abandonment. Her grades slowly improved as the rumors at school faded, replaced by the truth about what had really happened. Several teachers and parents reached out to apologize for believing the gossip, and Emily's friends rallied around her. I found my own support in a group for parents dealing with family estrangement, learning that cutting ties with toxic family members, even parents, was sometimes necessary for healing and growth. The hardest lesson was accepting that my parents might never acknowledge the harm they had caused, might never genuinely apologize or change. Forgiveness doesn't mean allowing toxic people to hurt you again. Our group leader often reminded us. It means releasing the power they have over your happiness and moving forward on your own terms. 6 months after the court hearing, Emily and I established new traditions to replace the family gatherings we had lost. We created a chosen family of close friends, neighbors, and colleagues who demonstrated the unconditional love and support we deserved. Emily, inspired by her experience, started a support group at school for teens dealing with family betrayal or estrangement. With Dr. Winters' guidance, she helped other young people navigate complicated family dynamics and establish healthy boundaries. The most important thing I've learned, she told me one evening as we prepared dinner together, is that family isn't just about blood. It's about who shows up for you, who loves you without conditions, who makes you feel safe and valued. I smiled, recognizing Brian's wisdom in her words. He had understood this truth long before I did, had tried to protect us from the toxic patterns in my family of origin. In many ways, his final gift to us had been the documentation that freed us from those patterns once and for all. 1 year after the hearing, we received news that my parents had moved to Arizona, selling their house and most of their possessions to pay their legal fees and debts. Uncle Jack had entered a rehabilitation program for his gambling addiction, and was slowly rebuilding his life, sending occasional emails updating us on his progress. We maintained a cautious distance, but I no longer harbored anger toward him. He had been caught in the same toxic family system as I had, reacting to it in different ways. As for my parents, I had come to accept that they might never change, might never acknowledge the pain they had caused. Their need for control, their inability to love unconditionally, their willingness to sacrifice others for their own interests. These were deeply ingrained patterns, unlikely to be broken without significant self-reflection and therapy. On the anniversary of Brian's death, Emily and I visited his grave, placing fresh flowers beside his headstone. "Dad would be proud of us," Emily said, her hand in mine, "for standing up for ourselves, for breaking the cycle." "Yes, he would," I agreed, thinking of the message he had written on our wedding photo. The day we started breaking the cycle. That evening, as we shared dinner with our chosen family friends who had supported us through the darkest times, Emily raised her glass in a toast. "To breaking cycles," she said with wisdom beyond her 16 years, "and to building something better in their place." As I looked around the table at the genuine love and connection we had created, I realized the profound truth that had emerged from our painful journey. True family is built on love, respect, and trust, not obligation or blood ties. Breaking toxic cycles requires immense courage, but leads to authentic healing and growth. And sometimes, the family you choose becomes more meaningful than the family you were born into. For the first time since this ordeal began, I felt completely at peace with our decision to cut ties with my parents. We had not only survived their betrayal but emerged stronger, wiser, and more committed to creating the loving family environment we deserved. In protecting Emily, in standing firm against manipulation and control, I had finally broken free from patterns that had defined my entire life. And in doing so, I had given my daughter the greatest gift possible: the knowledge that she was worthy of unconditional love and respect, and the courage to demand nothing less from every relationship in her life. That, I realized, was Brian's true legacy, not just the financial provision he had made for Emily's future, but the example he had set of what genuine love and family should be. Have you ever had to make the difficult decision to distance yourself from toxic family members? I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments. Sometimes the hardest choices lead to the greatest healing. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to choose their own well-being, even when family is involved. Thank you for listening to my journey, and I wish you the courage to create the healthy, loving relationships you deserve.